Hey everybody, Jamin here from Game Show with my weekly vlog update. So one of the things that caught my eye this week was that Riot Games released the numbers for viewership for League Championship Series. So during the final showdown a couple weeks ago between Samsung White and Royal Club, 27 million people watched the final. And that's certainly a lot of people, but it's actually a decrease of 15% compared to last year. Although there was an increase in the amount of time that people spent watching, it jumped from like 40 minutes to 60 something minutes, which obviously is very, very good. But that decrease in terms of the raw number of people who watched the final obviously was probably a bit of surprise given the growth of eSports and the big New York Times cover story from a couple weeks ago. So I just want to dive into this a little bit because I think it asks this very large question about eSports and who it's for and where its future might necessarily be going. So first of all, to be totally clear, 27 million people, that's a lot of people. Totally a lot of people, obviously millions of people. But to put it in perspective, the Super Bowl had over 100 million people watch it just in the United States alone. And 27 million people would put the championship somewhere in the number 20 spot in terms of American viewership. And this is something that was streamed globally. It would be roughly about as popular as the September 29th game between the Denver Broncos and the Philadelphia Eagles. But ultimately, I think what this signifies is that there may be a cap on the number of people who want to watch esports, which I know for those of you who are fans might be kind of hard for you to hear, but let me explain why. There's a core tension at the heart of televised, spectated gaming experiences, which is between people who watch esports because they want to become better players and people who watch esports because it's an entertaining, televised spectator event. I'll give you a good example. I watched some of the Dota 2 International this summer, and I was there. I was in Chicago. I wasn't there. I was in Chicago with Clayton Purdom, the editorial director for Killscreen, and we were watching a little bit of this together. And his fiance walked in and was just totally befuddled about what was happening on screen. She didn't know where to start, what she should be looking at. The camera jumps all over the place. Obviously, the shoutcasters are like giving commentary with words that she doesn't quite understand. And we were watching the noob stream, and this is for people who ostensibly are new to Dota 2. And this was very, very confusing for her. Because the big problem is that until this tension is resolved in terms of who esports is for, whether it should privilege people who are watching it or privilege people who actually want to get better, I think there's always going to be sort of cross purposes. So for example, when I watch a game of basketball, for example, I would never deign to think that I'll become like LeBron James by watching basketball. And if you look at the early history of televised football games, you see something similar. Early televised football games, the first one was aired in 1939, and it was thought that what people wanted to see was an exact one-to-one replication of what it would be like to be at a football game. So the score wasn't even on there, which is incredibly useful for people who are walking in. And over the years, over the last 60, 70 years of televised football, they've made all these concessions to give spectators information that's going to make them better spectators. But it may not necessarily be the information that a football player or a professional or aspiring football player would need to become better at the sport. But you see all the things that Fox has done. For example, Fox has been a pioneer in terms of sports telegraphic, so adding the first down marker so you can see where the first down marker is. That's not something you even get at the game. All the sort of like statistics and stuff that appear at the bottom. Obviously adding the sort of the Madden cam, the overhead cam, really gives you a sense of sort of the layout of the field, but you don't watch the game that way. That's just to give you some sort of perspective. Another great example of overcoming obstacles in terms of creating better spectatorship experiences, and this is one of the best, comes from poker. So, poker has been around for a very, very long time, but didn't really take off as a televised event until the late 90s, early aughts. One specific change really defined it and really sent the sport on its way. In 1995, there was an inventor named Henry Orenstein, and he filed a patent for a hole cam, which would be a small camera which would be placed underneath each of the competitors' players, underneath their two down cards. Now remember, in a game like poker, you sort of you're able to see three cards, which are up to three cards, which are visible to everyone, and then you have 2 cards that you and you only you have are privy to that information. It's a fog of war type of technique. And what this little hole cam did is that it gave viewers a sense of tension. All of a sudden, they had information that that the players didn't necessarily have, and that might not be the best thing for someone who wants to learn how to poker. There's other information that might need to be visible on the screen to make people better poker players, but that small adjustment is really what sent the sport on its way. And poker journalist John Vorhaus had argued that the invention of the hole cam, it gave omniscience to the audience as never had before, so they could watch a threat unfold in real time. The hand could be thought of, each hand could be thought of as a protagonist. And in Vorhaus's words, this is really powerful. He says, suddenly we could look at poker as an exercise in storytelling. That concession, the idea that what's most important in a televised sport is the storytelling, the narrative aspect of it, fundamentally shifted the way that people began to think about poker. And that's exactly the sort of concession that I think the esports will need to make over time in order to become popular. I don't know what that might necessarily be. I wrote a great story about it, about someone who's trying to make that adjustment. This guy, Drew Harry, who's a fellow at MIT, who introduced a product called Roar, so you could understand sort of what it was for fans. You could understand what was happening, so you could sort of hear the roar of the crowd. I'll link to it in the description. In any case, I think until esports makes that concession, as Drew Harry, the guy I interviewed, he had said that the holy grail is to have people who, to get lots of people who watch but don't necessarily play, because that's how you end up with a sport as big as soccer. That's how you get billions of people around the planet to watch a sport like soccer, is because you get to watch something that you're not necessarily going to become a part of. Anyway, that's what I thought. I could be totally wrong, and esports will be like 1 billion people next year, and I'll be eating my hat. I don't wear hats, but I'll find something in my house to eat. Anyway, I'll see you next week.